Good morning, everybody. I like to see all those smiling faces on this nice, warm Wisconsin morning. So we're here at St. Croix County Board of Supervisors. I'll call the meeting to order. And at this time, we will stand for an invocation from Tim Sackett, Transport for Christ.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation to come back again, and Happy New Year to everyone. Let's start a new year, and let's try to put last year behind us. I know the challenges will be the same, if not more, this year. Hopefully they're a little bit different than last year. But in looking at what we call challenges, out of the challenges that we face, we always try to set goals to meet those challenges. And many times accomplishment is different than success. You can accomplish a lot. And hopefully in your mind and in the minds of all the people in this county that you serve, we hope that your accomplishments will be successful. But we know that success, it means something different to everybody. But in creating an environment of discussion and decorum, we just pray that you, as a county board, we call you civil servants, and I know that you're here as in that capacity as a servant, and that's not always an easy thing to accomplish. But the Bible tells us that that we can make all the plans that we have, and we just trust that the Lord will direct the steps. So let's pray. Lord God in heaven, this is a new year to begin, and in many cases, most of the people here are in the middle of a year, whether it's a fiscal year or election year. There's many things that are coming up this year as we talk about challenges and turning challenges into goals and turning our accomplishments into successes. We just pray that in your word, when it says that man can make all the plans in their heart, but the Lord directs the steps. And your will and your goal for us is to live a life that has much peace and joy and contentment in it as we possibly can find. So we're just praying that the decisions made with this board and the people that address the board bring a healthy, peaceful, contentment life to the people in St. Croix County. And we're just trusting you to direct the steps. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Tim. You join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We'll have roll call, Cindy. We have two absent. Dave called in sick, so we'll, and Ryan's been sick, so we'll excuse those two. Thank you. We're now open for public comment. We're open for public comment at this time. Anybody from the public want to speak? Not seeing any, we'll move on to our consent agenda. Need a motion to approve that. Supervisor Schoberg, second. Supervisor Babbitt. And that'll be from the previous meeting, December 5th minutes. Date of the next meeting, February 8th. And then the rezoning request for Town of Baldwin Miller. Any discussion? We'll talk about the 8th of February 8th. We're talking about changing that meeting to the 8th. Is there a problem if there's, I want to bring that up for it so everybody think about that. Supervisor Babbitt?
Roger, just curious, the original date was Tuesday the 6th?
Yeah.
Is that right? And we're looking to change again to a Thursday. I guess I don't have an issue with it necessarily. I'm just curious about why the change, because we did it this month as well.
So is there any other discussion on that date change?
Yeah, I think the question was, why are we changing the date?
Yeah.
There's a Wisconsin Counties Association annual legislative meeting in Madison. It's a 2-day meeting, and I believe there will be several board members in attendance. At least the board chair and the vice chair will be there. And there may be other board members as well.
Any other discussion? Second. So motion and second to approve. Vote now. That was all yeses. Thank you. We have a recognition, and I will turn that over to our administrator. Mr.
Yes,
Thompson.
thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. At the end of the year and at the beginning of the year, typically we have several retirements of the county employees that have been here for several years. And I wanted to recognize those employees that have resigned at the end of the year or have announced their resignation shortly after the first of the year. And you know many of these employees. Dick Hesslink with the Highway Department will be retiring within the next few days. Kay Clowder in our Finance Department, 31 years with the county, has retired. Richard Colbeth with the Highway Department is retiring January 16th. He has 34 years with the county. Pam DeBruzzi in child support. She has over 34 years of service with the county. Nancy Bierbauer, who is a judicial assistant, just shy of 25 years with the county. She retired actually December 15th of 2017. There's another employee that is actually here this morning, Joanne Sprain, who is retiring. And Joanne has been with UW Extension for 11 plus years, and she has been in the position of family, living, and educator with St. Croix County with UW Extension. She's been involved with coaching and education, parent education, and has been instrumental with the Criminal or Community Justice Coordinating Council as well. Wanted to personally recognize Joanne for your years of service with St. Croix County, and thank you and all the employees that I've just mentioned that have put in significant years of service with the county. And Joanne, personally, thank you for all your work. It's been fun. I know you have plans to move someplace warmer, and I really envy you, and good luck. Did you want to say anything to the board? Okay, thank you.
I'll make this short. I want to thank Pat and the Community Development Committee members and the board for your support of not only UW Extension, but me personally, and understanding the importance of strong families. I didn't think I'd do this. I also want to thank our staff. Ryan could not be here today. He's not feeling really well. But thank you, Eric and Heather and other staff members. And the county departments that allowed us to work together. I started my career in St. Croix County as a summer 4-H intern a long time ago. And I think it's only fitting that I end my career, my extension career here. So I will miss all the people that I've worked with. And I will be doing some extension things in Florida, I'm sure, because my daughter's going to con me into doing something as a volunteer. So thanks again, and I wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan.
If I might, as a member of the Community Development Committee and having worked closely with Joanne over the time, especially that I've been on the county board, I wanted to just talk about the role that she's played, and I think it's probably often overlooked. She's worked really closely with the Sheriff's Department in the jail, with working with individuals with budgeting and nutritional counseling, family living skills, certainly with our human resources programs, and also with a lot of the employees that have moved here from South America and other countries working on our large farms in St. Croix County. There's transitioning skills, abilities, cultural changes that Joanne and other staff have worked with these individuals and families. And it's often overlooked in terms of what the family living agent role is. Our chair of our Community Development Committee, Dan Hansen, and I are planning to meet with Kristen Bruder in the near future, who is the coordinator for our 3-county region of Wisconsin for University Extension, to push that we get this position filled sooner than later, if you will. So I, too, want to say thank you for the work that you did as a co-coordinator with Ryan. That was very important, and of course Pat understands that and appreciates it, as does Ellen from Community Development. So again, thank you for your outstanding service, and you will be missed.
Supervisor Hanson.
I'll be brief. I can't do it better than Jill just did, but when the first time that I watched a drug court graduation, the young woman said in her testimonial that she didn't know how to balance her checkbook, and she didn't know how to manage a household and take care of her kids properly. And she credited Joanne with learning those things to go out into her life, now better equipped as an adult to take care of her life. I was so deeply impressed and proud that that's a person who works for our county to do that. And then I've watched it happen over and over again. The graduates of our drug court have been brought up to speed as a human being by Joanne Sprain, and I just want to thank you.
Nobody else? Thank you. We'll move on with our agenda. Our annual reports, District Attorney and Victim Witness. Mike is back here.
Good morning. I'm a little under the weather, so if my voice starts cracking or I cough into the thing, maybe we should change the microphone. You have my annual report. What you're going to notice on it is a couple of things. I want to go over something on two things that are found. I believe it's page 4 at the bottom. There's some budget items. I think important there. On Victim Witness, you're going to notice that 2017 actual revenue and 2016 actual revenue has a big difference. The primary problem is not all of 2017 has been paid back by the state. So the reimbursement rate from Victim Witness is actually, in the first half of 2017, was up over a little over 1% from the reimbursement rate from the state from the previous year. So we expect those numbers to be pretty much in line. On the District Attorney and Diversion, where revenue is down from 2016 about $65,000. That's due to the Justice Administration grant, that the JAG grant is what they know. That went away. That was funding a specific position. That's now, I believe, actually being funded through the TAD grant. So you'll see a difference in revenue. The real difference that you're going to see as you go through in some of the numbers, we're up significantly on both misdemeanors and felonies from last year. A lot of that has to do, quite frankly, with day reporting. The Day Report Center, we've always had conditions on our bonds about people having absolute sobriety. That's a routine matter for persons who have drug cases, drunk driving cases, or they have a history of abuse. Say in domestic matters, they were under the influence. With the Day Report Center, however, we have a mechanism to enforce that. It used to be law enforcement would catch them, again, using. It happened to be out in the community. Now, because they're reporting, we're catching more of those persons who are violating. So it's caused an upsurge in our bail jumping charges, our bond violation charges. However, Day Report Center serves a real important purpose in that I think for a lot of the individuals who are on bond, because they know they're going to be tested on a regular basis, it helps them start the process to get sober, whether that's from street drugs or alcohol. So those numbers are up, and primarily that's the cost. We've also had, our felonies are up because we have had more extraditions to the state of Minnesota this year. Those are reflected as felony charges, though we don't actually end up prosecuting those. In my 34 years as a prosecutor, I've actually only had 2 hearings on an extradition that's actually gone to the final stage where you have to take evidence. Generally, you're going to see that most situations have changed. Our diversion program is still quite busy. We're still taking a lot of those low-end, primarily youthful offenders, and working with them. Some significant changes have come in processing and working with the courts. In addition to the Day Report Center, we have been working with the courts, principally Judge Vlack, who has the subcommittee on domestic violence. We've done some changes. It used to be a person arrested for a domestic abuse situation, say it's a misdemeanor battery or misdemeanor disorderly conduct, could post a bond, $250 or $500, be released from jail, and they would be given an ordering date, 6 to 8 weeks down the line. Unfortunately, that after a 72-hour period expires, allows them to go back into the homestead. And by the time the court would see this case, the landscape has significantly changed. So the courts, along with the district attorney's office, made some change in the processing. Those persons are given, let's say someone's arrested on Friday night with a disorderly conduct, domestic abuse, they're given, and they post bond, which they're allowed to do under the bond schedule. They are ordered to come back the next court day, which is normally Monday morning or Monday afternoon at 1 o'clock. And they make up an appearance then, and then the court gets to decide what level of contact they can have with the victim, what level of contact or what other bond conditions, say absolute sobriety, and those matters. So we've done that on OWIs, and we've done that on domestic abuse to get those people in. It's not an additional work issue. It's really more of a time shift. Instead of taking care of it and reviewing it 6 weeks later, we review it as if they're in custody the next court working day. So that has been a significant change in the process. I think it's helped a lot. In terms of domestic violence, the subcommittee is working on a number of things. They're moving toward a compliance court. Long term, I think something more than a compliance court is actually needed. Change the culture. We're actively working with that. In my office, we have redistributed how domestic abuse is done. We have one prosecutor who's total, not entire caseload, but does most of the domestic abuse. That's for consistency in how they're handled. So one person is reviewing those matters, one person is making charging determination, one person is making disposition determinations. We've done some things to try to get people to have more evaluations in domestic abuse. So we're not doing it by our gut. We're trying to get more evidence-based decision-making practices in to make some determination on how best to handle this. So that's the summary. Those are the changes. The big change I see in 2018 is the county has, for the last 3 years, supported an assistant district attorney position. It's an FTE position at this time. The person in that FTE position has taken a state position in Pierce County. Will start the first week of February. I'm going to, I've been working with Pat and with Human Resources. I probably will have that reclassified to an LTE position, and I probably will bring it back as a part-time person at a slightly higher wage rate. We have a retired assistant that many of you might be familiar with, Frank Collins, who's willing to do that. I'm doing that in anticipation that 2018 is looking like it might be a rougher budget year, and rather than it'll allow me to reduce the cost of that position. I think I'll get as much work out of Mr. Collins on a part-time situation, should he agree to take the position, as I would a fresh out of law school person that I would get into it. The training curve certainly is going to be less. But we're looking to do that to reduce some of the costs in the office. With that, does anybody have any questions for me?
Any questions? None? Supervisor Hanson.
Just looking at the TAD grant, is that every year you've got roughly $150,000? Is that renewable, 150 a year from 2017 for up to 5 years, or is it a flat 150 for the 5 years?
It's renewable every year at the 150,000 level. It's the first funding was competitive, and as long as we stay within our mandates, and Mike, if I misspeak, correct me, we should be able to renew that every year. We have in the past done these kind of grants. It's going to stay, though, at the $150,000 level. The problem, of course, will come in as much of this is in salary costs. And Mike formerly was it, but those salary costs will go up. So within the grant, we have to do certain things. But the $150,000 will be there for 18, 19, 20, and 21.
Any other questions? Supervisor Babbitt.
Just briefly, having had the opportunity to work with ADA Collins in the past, I hope he comes back.
Well,
I think he'd be a terrific addition to the group, and I'm going to put my vote in now that hopefully we can convince him to do that.
I've been working on it for a little bit of time, and he had to get some things set with the Board of Bar Examiners and get some CLE. He told me last week when I was, the reason why I didn't appear in December is because I was anticipating my first grandchild and had to leave whenever that happened. But Frank and I have been working on it for a while since we've known of the possibility. And he let me know last week he's got those things changed. So now I need to talk with HR and Pat and work out a couple of details on that, but I think Frank will be coming back.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, Chairman, I'm going to be leaving. I have a couple of matters in my office since I was just back from seeing the baby that I need to still take care of. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move forward. Emergency support services. Stephen.
Good morning. Happy New Year. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today on behalf of the Emergency Support Services Department. I know you have a short agenda today, so I'll try to stay under my allotted 3 hours. I'll keep it a little bit shorter than that. Before I start, I was at a department head meeting. We meet monthly with the boss for a variety of issues, and I was thinking about all the departments that we work with on a either daily or regular basis, including facilities, highway, sheriff's office, finance, community development, CJCC, the county clerk, the district attorney, information technology, HHS, admin, and the corp counsel. And I'm not sure as county board supervisors if you recognize how well your department heads and your departments actually work together. I know you all serve on a variety of different committees that they report to and such, but it's very commendable to see the interaction between all of them, and they're always working together and moving forward. Emergency Support Services has two divisions, emergency management and emergency communications. I'll talk for a moment about emergency management, and then I'll drag Terry Anderson up here in a second to talk about emergency communications. In 2017, Emergency Management welcomed Natasha Cardinal as the new Emergency Management Manager. In fact, Natasha's in training today and not here. Emergency management serves to coordinate effective disaster response and recovery efforts in support of local governments to all of our St. Croix County communities through careful planning, training, and exercising. Last year, in 2017, emergency management was heavily involved in a number of areas. Most notably, the EM staff submitted and received a federal pre-disaster mitigation grant in excess of $47,000 to update St. Croix County's 5-year all hazards mitigation plan, which focuses on evaluating the community's potential disasters and appropriate mitigation strategies in reducing and eliminating future damages. The EM folks also participated and held 6 local and regional exercises. They also assisted the village of North Hudson, the village of Hammond, and Warren Township with the submission of disaster situation report from last summer's storms. And the emergency manager personally was sent out to provide mutual aid response in efforts in Rusk County, Barron County, and Trempealeau counties following severe storms, tornado damage, and flooding last year. Emergency management continues to secure flooding, to coordinate and conduct annual training and exercise opportunities, and network with and support the objectives of a local emergency services programs. Emergency management is like an insurance policy. You pay the premiums and hope you never have to file a claim. She's kind of, if we thought our 911 dispatchers were the unsung heroes, she's really back there because we hope that her efforts are never needed. But every day, like today, she's in training, but she's always planning, whether it's exercises, whether it's assistance for the submission of grants, or whether it's out with boots on the ground to help our communities or other communities that have been afflicted by storms, natural damage, man-made, whatever the case may be. Emergency communications, you've heard a lot about it. You have my annual report in front of you. One area that is not in there concerns the concerns. There's a paragraph in there that says, what concerns do you have? And I got called on the carpet, can I say, by Supervisor Ockendorf about why we didn't discuss personnel in our concerns, considering the heavy discussion we had on the county board floor and in the Public Protection Committee. In the past, when I've submitted annual reports and in my previous tenure here as a department head, the annual reports were never used for personnel issues. But I would be remiss, obviously, in looking at the total annual report if I didn't at least mention the staffing in the Emergency Communications Center. We currently have 16 dispatchers, of which 3 are supervisors, plus a technician, plus the manager, Terry Anderson. We've had a rough year in terms of turnover. For those of you who have sat in any of the human resource meetings or committees or been involved in hiring, I think you recognize that it is somewhat difficult to get people to sign on these days to work. Don't ask me why. It's even worse when it comes to emergency services and the sheriff's office. As Dr. McGrath said, the 3 toughest positions to fill in county government are road deputies, jailers, and dispatchers. For some reason, today's group doesn't want to work nights, weekends, holidays, swing shifts, overtime, whatever the case may be. We've hired people last year who started in our training, and as you know from Having been in the Emergency Communications Center and having funded projects down there, it is a very involved place. If you look at one of our dispatch positions, they have 6 computer monitors. They have a number of different programs they're operating on, the emergency medical dispatch, which has been recognized on the floor here. It's a very active place. And even though they're not on the front line, they in fact are the first responders for the first responders. And they have a very important job and a critical job. And I think we hire people and they get in there. Even some of the experienced people we've hired from other 911 dispatch centers, some stay a short while, some stay a little while, and then a number of them go. And it's funny because we've had a very stable dispatcher population and staff, but over the last couple of years, we've had a retirement, a few resignations for people who moved on to other jobs, and then those newbies who came in the front door and went out the back door within 4 to 6 weeks. So it's been kind of rough. We're in fact still in the process of hiring one more full-time dispatcher. One of the people we hired 2 months ago just submitted her resignation. She had some medical issues, so we're in the process of doing a background investigation to hire another full-time dispatcher. In conversations with the county administrator and at the direction of the county administrator, we are beefing up our reserve corps, or part-time, whatever you want to call it. From 1 or 2, we're going to try to move up to 2 to 4, and we're going to try to get them to commit to more than just a few hours a month. Keeping people in the reserve status is just as problematic as keeping people in a full-time status. So we are working on that. Our objective in 2018 is to have a full staff of our 16 dispatchers, and like I said, 2 to 4 reserve dispatchers that we can count on for anywhere from 20 to 30 hours, perhaps cumulative per week. We'll see how that works out. I think we're going to be okay, and the county administrator has chatted with us about a review in 6 months and looking when we start the budget process for 2019 to determine whether we need to add another full-time dispatcher. One other topic I want to talk about before I move on to Mr. Anderson is the Phase 2 project, particularly since you have authorized in excess of $8 million in expenditures. To date, we have expended about $7 million in that project. It is still ongoing. We've kind of run into a few hiccups and gremlins here and there, but it is transitioning. We are moving into our new system. We have the potential or the possibility of building one more tower in the Holton area. Because of funding, we're looking for financial partners. We believe we've received one from the state of Minnesota who may be contributing approximately $300,000 to the construction of that tower. We're also negotiating with another public safety agency in Minnesota to share the costs. Personally, I don't want to have to come back to the county board and ask for any more money. You've been very generous in allocating the $8.2 million for our system. And as you know, you've been getting quite a return on your investment. But I don't want to have to come back to the well if I don't have to, even though we know that we're eventually going to have to build a tower in Holton, which is why through our consultants who set us up with the officials in Minnesota, we've been able to at least get an agreement to agree and a promise to come forward to help us fund that tower. So you'll hear more about that in spring as we move along, but the plan right now is in April to switch over to our digital law enforcement channel, and hopefully by summertime, the Holton Tower will be built and up, and the Phase 2 project will be completed. For the nitty-gritty and details of the Emergency Communications Center, I've asked Terry Anderson, the Emergency Communications Manager, to be present this morning, and he can give you a little spiel, and both of us can answer questions when he's done.
Good morning. With the calendar year 2017 coming to a close, the actual 911 calls that we had for the entire year were 30,343 911 calls for the year. That was up from last year just a little bit. The administration phone lines are non-emergency phones. The inbound and outbound was a grand total of 133,369 phone calls that the telecommunicators handled in 2017. So there's some rough numbers now that the calendar year has come to a close. Our calls for service with the CAD, the incidents that we track, is still around that 95,000. I'm still awaiting to get the actual report, but that's right about where we are. That keeps ticking up slightly every year. This adverse weather that we've had, there's been 3 structure fires over this last weekend. One event was in excess of about 3 to 4 hours in length. It took them a while to get that one totally overhauled and completed. There's also my staff each and every day do a great job with the calls that they deal with, both for the citizens and the end users that we provide service to. On the 30th at 2:38 in the morning, there was a new life that came into the world on the side of I-94 again. There was a newborn. The parents were trying to get to Minneapolis, and the newborn decided it was time to come. Within 4 minutes of the 911 call, the child was born, and telecommunicator Corey Bacon provided instructions on how to handle that situation and take care of everything, and had several minutes prior to any law enforcement or EMS arriving. So kudos to her for handling that in such a great fashion. So that's all I had.
Yeah, but it was a little unfair because Corey just had a baby of her own, so she had that experience. Are there any questions for us?
Supervisor Schoberg?
The last page of your presentation materials show what the department budget status is, and I don't quite understand what those figures mean. I see approved budget $1,963,000, and then as of November 30th, $244,000 with 87% remaining. What does that mean? Has some account transfer just not occurred, or who created this thing?
I believe the 87% remaining should actually be 87% used up, which would be 13% remaining. My apologies.
That's a nice explanation. Thank you. Back to the issue of having dispatchers available to serve our community. I assume this is a statewide issue. It's not just St. Croix County. And if it is a statewide issue, what have our local legislators done to address this issue?
It is a regional issue. I know all my counterparts in the surrounding counties are having the same issues as we are. Even though we're across the river into Minnesota, we're all experiencing that same issue. In regards to the legislatures doing anything, I know there's a push at funding for training and such for 911 telecommunicators for our profession. It's in the early stages yet, and I believe it's trying to gain some traction and make progress in that aspect.
So that's for training, not for actual support of personnel. Yeah.
Correct.
Do you know, are the legislators, local legislators, in touch with you, working on this at all?
We've had, when Senator Harsdorf was a senator before she took over as a cabinet member, she reached out to us quite a bit about 911 funding. And obviously, before you can move anywhere, you have to have funding for positions and equipment and such. And so St. Croix County, the county board chairman, the county administrator, we've all been pushing through both the counties association and lobbying just from us. I don't know if I can use the word lobbying, but we've been pushing to increase the 911 funding, actually to restore the 911 funding. We used to have funding in the state of Wisconsin for 911, and this is not a political statement, but as is often done, governors rate that fund, and one of our past governors rated the 911 fund, I think, to balance the budget in the schools or something. We're kind of an easy target, and that with that fund there. So I believe the legislature has now passed a new funding bill to help with the next generation 911 and such. But often, as is the case with all of these funding bills, for some reason they seldom fund people. They generally will fund equipment, programs, training, it is really tough to get funding for positions. They feel that those are left to the respective municipalities and jurisdictions.
Supervisor Berkey?
I wanted to commend your department and Natasha and her previous gal that was in that position and working with our county fair board with respect to some planning and some other needs that we have at the county fairgrounds. So I'm hoping in, next year we could sit down and look at the possibility of putting together a grant for a building that would be on the fairgrounds and would also serve, obviously, the residents of the city of New Richmond. And I know it's complicated and there's different players involved, but we do appreciate the opportunity to work with you on that. It's a need.
Thank you, and I will.
City of Glenwood, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say New Richmond. City of Glenwood City. Thank you, Supervisor Nolan.
Thank you for that. I'll pass that on to Natasha. I know that Kristen Saylor, when she was here, most of you remember her, was very aggressive in assisting the communities in the county fair board. And Natasha has spoken with me about that. We haven't talked about the grant per se, but when she gets back, I will address that issue with her.
Any other questions? Supervisor?
I just want to throw one other thing out there that people probably don't realize about our emergency management is that yesterday I received an email that there's already a plan in place for Super Bowl Sunday. That St. Croix County, because of the no-fly zone that's going on around the Twin Cities and this and that, New Richmond's airport is expected to, they're talking like a lot of personal jets flying into New Richmond because it's 2 miles outside of some no-fly zone. So if anybody wants to grab a vehicle, might be able to make some money. But anyways, Steve and his team, and Natasha and Terry, they've already got a plan in place for Super Bowl Sunday, and they plan on turning it over to Emergency Command. They're thinking around 2:30 on Sunday of that day, and we will operate under that until after the game is over. So the work they do in that department it's a lot more than we see at the county board level, I can tell you that much. So for that I say thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Brinkman. In that regard, the Super Bowl, as you know, is a fairly major event. We've been advised, we didn't get a lot of information, including the sheriff. We were kind of left out. You get to that river, and they just forgot we were here. So we decided to go on the offensive, a preemptive strike. We reached out. I had Natasha reach out to her counterparts. She got Wisconsin Emergency Management off the dime and got them going. We are going to set up our Emergency Operations Center that afternoon, as Supervisor Brinkman indicated. We're going to call it a light operation. That means just fewer pizzas. We anticipate most of our hotels will be full. They're telling us that hotels will be full 2.5 hours out of Minneapolis. The airport issue. Our hospitals, in their infinite wisdom and their planning in Twin Cities, they've designated a second tier of hospitals. All of those second tier hospitals are further out than Hudson, like Blaine and stuff. And now, some rocket scientists over there said, oh, maybe we ought to rethink that. So now we're looking at utilization of our hospitals if we have a major, God forbid, terrorism incident or some other incident. And then, of course, it's February in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So Robbie was included in that because if we have that amount of traffic on our highways and you have a snow incident, like is going on the East Coast this morning, you just don't know what you're going to face at that time of year. So we kind of went on the offensive, and Natasha's kind of coordinating all that to ensure that if there is an issue, we're on top of it and we're ready to roll.
And Steve, if by the very remote chance that the Vikings are in the Super Bowl, that
when you say remote, sir, can you define that?
Those plans will be altered a bit?
Yes.
Because of the numbers?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. The NFL hasn't said this publicly, but they don't really want the Vikings in there because that'll affect all the revenue. In fact, the Minnesota folks are a little distressed too because while they're Viking fans, they know from a revenue standpoint, hotels and everything else, it will change the dynamics of this if the Vikings play in the Super Bowl and win.
Yeah, and then lastly, we'd be remiss if we didn't recognize Mrs. Smith too for her work in your office as well.
You know, Janet is our true unsung hero. She's the glue that keeps our office together. She works on grants. She works on EM exercises. She works on emergency communication matters. She coordinates public protection committee activities. She's my right hand, and I have to say, and thank you for that, it would be a long day without Ms. Smith in the office. Thanks, Janet.
Any other questions?
Thank you, folks.
Thank you,
Again,
Steve.
Happy New Year.
We'll move on to our sheriff's annual report.
Thanks for leaving me some time, Steve. They actually ran out of batteries. Oh no, that went off at your 25-minute mark. So thank you. Good morning. Our year-end report. Obviously, we had a lot of changes this year in personnel. Obviously, John Schultz retired after 38 years serving the people of the county, and that was obviously a big void to fill. So we've been backfilling that move, and we are pretty set in our administrative group right now. And for those of you that supported me and this whole process, I thank you. One of the other big changes this year was a new position that was kind of repurposed and approved, and that was the crime data analyst position. I think that's going to serve the CJCC well alongside us. When we compile statistics, that gentleman started on December 27th, and he will be probably introduced here very soon to the CJCC at their next meeting. But that gentleman is Kevin Hamlin, and he comes to us out of the cities. So what an impressive resume. We're looking to see see the outputs that he gets. So, and that position was actually available because Mary Martell, who had put in 30 plus years with the county, decided to retire last April. So the awards ceremony, you see, we actually recognized a whole bunch of folks this year, and which we do every year. Also with our officers, there were also some large incidences within the county that Richmond was also recognized. Some of the life-saving awards, we also reached out to our partners in the dispatch center that really get the ball rolling and get us in a position to be successful in a lot of these life-saving efforts. So that is a true team effort, and I, as always, express my thanks to the dispatch center and Steve DeKosh and his crew. We have a mounted posse that we're getting up and running. They will be used for call-outs, for search and rescues. They've been down at the county fair this year. They are going to be in some of the parades. They seem to be a big hit. They were a really big hit at the county market. What we were doing there was, it was bell ringing for the Salvation Army. So our dogs stopped. They brought a couple horses down. The horses got more apples and carrots bought by folks going in and out of there that they had to keep one horse from checking every bag that left the store. They had to keep him in check. But they had a really good time doing that, so we're looking forward to getting them more visible as the year moves on. They plan on being out there in several more parades as we go on this year. So one thing I did not put down on some of our peripheral groups and support is the chaplain program. We currently have 4 chaplains that are utilized throughout the county. They get called out to critical incidences or fatalities, deaths in the home. They had about 20 call-outs this year where they responded to residences or to scenes. and they are really they're a good support system for not only those in the community, but for our staff as well. And they are utilized by other agencies and law enforcement and the fire service when need be. Jail day report. I know Michael Keefe had mentioned, or Michael Nieskus had mentioned some of the added workload that has created for his office. It's also added a lot of activity within the jail and the day report center area. I threw in there some of the numbers of in-person contacts. It's astounding to me that over 9,200 people have walked in since March on face-to-face contacts. It was really an opening in the system that we just weren't capturing in all the years past. Now we have a much better tracking system and an accountability system for those out on bond. I think it's a safer situation. I've heard even from several of those that had to report to the day report that if not for this program, they would have reviolated. They would have reoffended and gone right back to using. So I've heard that from 3 personally that thank me for that. So that's a great system. You see our numbers continue to rise on jail bookings, 2,900 individuals processed into the jail. 101 average daily population for our folks downstairs. That's up a bit from last year. I think this really telling, again, is something that we're working forward with and preparing for is 358 occurrences where the inmate was placed on a suicide or medical watch. That continues to rise. We don't have a lot of answers, and really we don't have a lot within the facility structurally that is good placement for these folks. So I think 2022 or 2023 we're looking out on how can we do some things different for housing some of these inmates that are either in crisis or have some serious medical issues or as a result of detoxing. Jail programs. I did not add that, but and Joanne's brain has left. You're right, Supervisor Berkey. She was very instrumental in a lot of our programs. So with her departure, the co-parenting, positive solutions for families, money management, positive parenting, rural colors, those are no longer going to be available to the inmates because Joanne really led the charge on them. So we hope to get somebody in place to help out with those. With those programs, some of the numbers, we had 77 volunteers in 2017 to assist with 27 programs. Of those 27 programs, 2,027 hours of class instruction took place. And of those, we had some paid instructors, but 1,916 hours were pure volunteer hours. That is a lot that we could not do without those volunteers and the public's help. 9,865 inmate hours of attendance. So there are a lot of inmates that are benefiting from all of the classes that are taking place within the facility. We did re-up our contract again with the Employment and Services for adults with disabilities. They are doing our washing and folding and working in the back in our city within a city that we have. So again, without them, that makes our job a lot more difficult. We're really happy to have them on board. Field services investigations, we've done a lot out there as well. These guys are busy doing search warrants and regular traffic patrols. We have the new drug task force that we've done a lot of work in, getting a task force sergeant and then utilizing the old DD building up in Richmond, the old ESR building. That thank you to the administration for helping us make that area possible, and Jim Ellsbury and facilities that assisted us getting that place up and running. The courts, as you can see, our inmate Transports are going to increase. We were dealing with lock and load. We still are, but on a less frequent basis. Their contract came in much higher than what we had been paid in the past or what we've been paying in the past. So we had to do some restructuring of transports. More will fall back on our staff. But again, the telling one in paragraph number 2, how many people went to Winnebago, Mendota, Sacred Heart, Lutheran, Amory? That's 101 people. 47 of those go into Mendota, which is a 5-hour ride, which is 2 deputies both ways. And then 61 of those out of the 101 had to come back within 72 hours for to be seen before a judge. And so that means of the remaining, those were either released from the facility and they did not make that 72-hour, or they waived their hearing and remained down there for treatment. And there are times we get all the way to Winnebago and the person that's there says, I'm not leaving with you. And our guys come back. Reschedule the court. So it's a trial as the guys work through it. So forensics, you see the numbers that we're doing in our download area on our forensic location within our facility, going through phones, cell phone exams, computers. This year, we're in the process of expanding that area down in the office. We were having issues with how much that room heated up with all the computers in there, all the equipment. So we're redoing some things down there as well. So we're going to have kind of a facelift there, as well as some new carpet. So we're looking forward to that. And our goals, we surely hope to have the body worn cameras in place this year. I see no reason that will be deterred at all. I'd like to get a multidisciplinary response team similar to the drug task force, and that's to deal with some of the more sensitive crimes. Now with the Super Bowl, that also brings another sex crime element that we'll be working on as well. Not just preparing for weather, preparing for the natural disaster, but it's also preparing for a criminal element that's going to come to this area. And of course, farther away, our hotels are going to be affected by that as well. So we've got plans in place and working with some state groups on that too. So on the last page on our outputs, I want to point something out, and that's the calls for service. A couple things out on this page. The calls for service, we're at 22,000. Last year we were at about 9,900. The big discrepancy there is in the years past, we had always documented that number as incidences where we took a case number on and a report was written. I felt it was more important to, as Terry Anderson said, they take 90-some thousand calls for service. Well, 22,000 of those calls came to our office. Those could be anything from assisting another agency, looking for a cell phone hang-up, that may not generate a report, but it is active work being done by these guys. So I wanted to recognize that because these guys are busy out there and there's not a lot of downtime of sitting around. So I think that properly reflects some of the activity that we have. Traffic crashes, you see, went up as well from 962 last year in 16 to 1155. I do want to throw out that 533 of those crashes were animal related. Deer, turkey, bear, coyote, raccoon, and dog. So that leaves us still with 600 either property damage or injury crashes, but a lot of those were the animal ones. No gavel yet. He said he was going to gavel me if I went too long, but I figured Steve set the bar, so I had some time. Any questions?
I think he's getting close.
Supervisor Schoberg?
Yeah, just 2 questions. In addition to the calls for service being up dramatically, and you described that or explained that, the adult arrests also almost went up by 100%. Can you explain that one? And then I'd also like to ask you to describe what it would be like if I had a mental illness crisis and then I was put in the back of a squad car for 5 hours. What is that like to the sheriff's deputies who have to ride with an individual having a crisis for 5 hours? And that just seems to be almost inhumane treatment of this individual. So those two things. First of all, the easy question, the adult arrest, and then the harder one, what is it actually like for this ride across the state?
The easy question on the adult arrest, that has a lot to do with the day report center. So when an individual doesn't show up, say their part of their bond is that they are to show up 3 times a week for testing. They miss the first time, they miss the second time, they miss the third time. Those are all considered bail jumping charges that are reviewed by the district attorney's office. So they document that, you know, the person had it in there, they signed it, and they failed to oblige by the bail jumping standards set forth by the court. So a lot of those have to do with getting sent up for review by the district attorney's office. Now, of those, a single person, now today, a person is going up for 11 counts of bail jumping that he was charged with for failure to report, and when he did report, he tested positive. So we took him into custody, and all those misses went up for 11 counts of bail jumping. So that 2,400 isn't an additional 1,100 extra people. That's just the additional charges that are gone up to be reviewed by the district attorney. I will say off of that, we do have a 90% compliance rate, which I think that shocked a lot of us. That is a compliance rate that I think is very good. And the 10% non-compliance, a lot of those are repeat offenders. So again, I think the State Report Center is really doing well. The drawback to that is that's an extra stress on our staff that are assigned to that day report. And I did request another person for that area, and we're hoping in the years to come that we can do some restructuring, and there may be some restructuring this year anyway, just to give them a little bit of reprieve of all their work. Now to the tough question, what's that like being, we've talked about this, I have personal conversation with some, it's detrimental not only to that person, it is a strain on resources for the staff. It's a strain on families that have to go pick them up when they're released. 5 hours is a long time. Our guys get paid for it, so is it a big stress for them? Well, it's not comfortable, and sometimes those mental and medical issues require them to stop at a hospital on the way down. Sometimes these folks have to be restrained even more to get them to where they need to go. I can't imagine that does anything for the psyche of, and especially for those that willfully walk into the hospital and say, I need help. And then away we go down there. Now there are some differing opinions of should they be restrained. Well, that's a whole different conversation. That there is the officer safety issue. There is the, keeping them in place in a vehicle. Though you can't open our squad doors from the inside, our windows have been broken out before. And going down the road and somebody popping out at 55 or 60 doesn't really work well. So there are reasons why we do that. Are they the best and most positive? Well, we want to keep everybody as safe as we can initially. So if something was closer, boy, that would be great for so many reasons.
Supervisor Nelson.
Has there been any talk now that we realize this issue as far as regionally doing something with our counties around us to look into the future, the near future, hopefully, to see if we can get something? I know one individual who's Patty Shockner says that, we have the ability to get across the river to do things, but we have an issue. It's called the river, and we need to get over that bind. So hopefully we'll have people, mainly legislators, to reach across the border to say, hey, we need help in this issue. And if they can work together, that hopefully something will happen soon. Because I agree with Roy. I mean, and I agree also, a friend of mine, he's a deputy for Dane County. So he drives all the way up here to drop people off. So he goes all around. He'll be in Kansas one day, New York, and it's a tough situation. It's a huge cost drain. On top of that, what caused the contract to get so large from the other firm that we were using?
Probably a change in, we had a pretty good relationship with the founders of that company, a former sheriff, former chief deputy from across the state. So John knew them well, and there was some good deal that we got. And then maybe their profit margin wasn't where they felt it should be. That group kind of stepped down. Some others took over in that, and it came back, and it doubled. So as to the question of any local work being done, if you'll indulge me 2 minutes, the clock has started. Fred Johnson can probably answer that question much with a lot more information than I am.
Come on up, Fred.
Thank you. I can provide a quick update. First, this is one of the priorities of the Mental Health Community Justice Collaborating Council, that being the lack of beds available for emergency detentions for individuals that are experiencing a mental health crisis and need to be hospitalized. We've had multiple meetings to talk about how we move this topic forward. The last meeting that we had of the subcommittee was involved an invitation to an individual named Patrick Court, who is the Division of Care and Treatment Administrator for the Department of Health Services. He and his Assistant Administrator, Holly Audley, came to St. Croix County, met with members of our subcommittee, and talked specifically about our concerns that the sheriff has identified. The state has engaged in a study to look at the needs for beds across the state of Wisconsin, and because we had this meeting, we were allowed to and given the opportunity to provide local input. That study has yet to be completed. I haven't received a copy, so we're hoping that that would be a next step to engage in conversations. We've had conversations with local legislators about this issue at our public health legislative events, and more recently there's been discussion regionally with other counties and with other individuals in various individuals from counties to meet with legislators or to develop a plan. So more regionally, Dunn County, St. Croix County, et cetera. And I am a part of that subcommittee or that regional committee. Included in requests were invitations sent to our 2 hospital partners. And Pete Van Dusart has indicated an interest to participate in that regional subcommittee. And Chief Young from the River Falls Police Department has also expressed an interest to participate in that subcommittee. So on the mental health CJCC subcommittee, we do have representation from the Sheriff's Office, Dan Van Summeren. Chief Young is on that subcommittee, as well as Chief Rickard. So we do have, and this is a topic that's being discussed regularly.
Well, most of the questions I was going to ask have been asked by the other supervisors, but one thing I'm going to bring up, and it might not be effective or anything like that, Baldwin has an empty hospital. And I'm just wondering how feasible that would be to fill in this situation. Or if anyone's even looked at it, if anybody's thought about it, if counties can work together. But to have something like that be available is probably a rarity.
Allison Page, the CEO from Western Wisconsin Health, is also on our mental health CJCC subcommittee. So when we get the report back, we'll certainly talk about all options that may be available to address the issue that's been discussed here. So yes, we talked about a variety of things.
Any other questions? Supervisor Babbitt?
Just briefly, a couple of comments. In looking at the top 5 positions in the sheriff's office, I would venture to guess that it's rare in the state of Wisconsin to have 3 women in top 5 positions. I think that's extraordinary. Having had the opportunity to serve on committees with both Chief Deputy Borgschatz and Investigator Hart, I couldn't speak highly enough about both of them. I think they're well placed and certainly deserve the positions that they have and will do very well. Secondly, I just wanted to highlight a couple things that you said, Sheriff Knudsen. One is the opportunity for disabled adults to work in the jail. I've had opportunity to learn a little bit about that program, and I know that that's a significant part of those people's lives and something they value enormously, and I really appreciate that that's an ongoing process in terms of what the jail is doing right now. And finally, as has already been said, I appreciate your highlighting the mental health issue. But as you know, we also have a substance abuse issue that we're struggling with too in terms of available detox facilities. And all of those issues are being looked at carefully, but this turns out to be a vexing problem. Obviously, if it were easy to do, it would have been done because I think everybody recognizes this incredible stress that it places on the patient, not to mention on the Sheriff's Department and other departments in the county. So I appreciate you bringing that stuff to the fore and maybe stimulating some more discussion on all of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Babbitt. The ESR, I just want to also recognize Pat Thompson for that as well, because we've had lots of talks about some price increases that they require through the years, and we've made some adjustments in the budget for that, and that has been one of the top priorities, keeping them here. So I think that's important.
Supervisor Nelson.
And just remember too, you have the ability to be a junior deputy for the day. So if you go through the proper channels, and you're going to find out, which I always talk about in my fire job, the communication. So you've heard from our dispatch. Now you can work with a deputy and ride along with them. See how important that communication is, and see the money that we're investing into our 911 system to see how that works. Because I think they feel a little bit better with what we're doing until we close that last tower, and then we're done with that. I mean, it works good now, but we're going to make it a lot better. So, yeah, junior deputy for the day. Check out the program. I think it's a worthwhile thing to do.
Thank you. And I did calendars for everybody on your in front there. Another good year. Over 1,200 submissions by the kids, and they did very well on some of their art, and they were all recognized with some gift cards and a nice ceremony. So we will continue that program. It's actually a lot of fun.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. And I know it's elections coming up, so win, lose, or draw, I appreciated working with each one of you. I'm sure we'll be doing that in the future as well, but thank you guys for all your support. Thanks.
Now I'll ask supervisors, do you want to take a short 5-minute break before we finish up? Is that okay? Okay, we'll take a short 5-minute break. Are we ready to go into open session? It's that time. I have a quorum, so we can go back into open session. So we're going to start with our financial report from our administrator.
Okay. You have the financial reports in your packet. They represent financial activity through the end of November of 2017. So first, looking at revenues, there are a couple departments that I'll be following up on, but I believe it's all dollars that will be booked by the end of the year before we close the books. Emergency support services, I see they're not here this morning. I'll follow up with Steve. Mike Nieskus mentioned the victim witness grant revenues, land and water, Ellen, and land records. Those are 4 areas where we're showing that we don't have the revenues booked yet, but I believe we will before we close the books. And then finally, risk management, but those are just chargebacks to other departments that haven't been booked. So we're at 31% in revenues for budget remaining. On the expenditure side, it looks like all budgets, with the exception of one, will be under budget, hopefully by the end of the year. We have 24% remaining of budget, which is good, with only 1 month left of expenditures. The one area that was commissions and committees, we've adjusted that in the 2018 budget, so that budget should be okay next year. And then lastly, the capital improvement project status. We had a total budget, including the nursing home, of $38.7 million, and project year to date is we're at $32.6 million. Again, that includes the nursing home project with a total budget of $21.8 million and year to date actual of 21.5. So we're still under budget, and I believe I authorized one final expenditure released to the Market and Johnson. So that number will be a lot closer by the end of the year, but there still will be a positive balance. At the first of the year, actually January 2nd, we switched over to the new financial system, the ERP project. If you look at your CIP project list in the Department of Finance, as you recall, we budgeted approximately $2.9 million for a new ERP system. So with about a year of planning, and on January 1st, we flipped the switch, and we are now working in the new Oracle financial system, and there have been some minor hiccups that we're working through, nothing major. Things are working. The next phase of this project will be the human resources side of it, human capital management, HCM, and we hope to go live July 1st of 2018 on that side of it, and that will completely integrate our financial systems with our human resources systems, which had prior to this been operating independently and separately. So overall, we're off to a good start for the first of the year, and things look good financially on the 2017 front for the budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions, Supervisor Schoberg?
I did my homework. So on the CIP.
Yes.
On that page. First of all, it seems like community development was supposed to have used the bike pedestrian plan funds of $100,000, but nothing was spent, and there's a couple other park facilities that just nothing got spent. Maybe it's because their staff was involved in the water study group. I don't know. I'd like a little bit of an explanation as to why that seems to be behind the schedule. And then an explanation on the highway building fund, why that's $800,000 spent more than it was supposed to. And then finally, why does the CIP budget for 2017 on page 58 of $5,787,000, why is that different than the CIP budget on page 57 for $8,463,000?
I'm going to, this will be a tag team response. For the bike pedestrian plan implementation, I know that they are still in, I should really turn it over to Ellen or Robbie, who are both working on this, but they're in the process of putting together some signage for some projects, and so that project is just really just getting off the ground now. And then there have been some other parks projects that were in the budget that, Ellen, you can explain why some of those projects have been carried forward into this year.
Well, Rob and I have been meeting and with our staff for a couple times throughout the year and working on the project, and we've given reports, updates to the Community Development Committee. And basically what we've been doing is determining what we can do and getting direction on with that $100,000 that would be reasonable. For instance, we got direction from our committee, the Community Development Committee, and I believe the Transportation Committee, that they'd like to see us apply for a TAP grant towards the at least one of the top projects that was identified in the bike ped plan, which we've been working on. If you want to add anything about that.
The TAP grant will be due in the next, or was due or is due in the next 2 weeks.
Yep, 2 weeks.
So we've been working on that grant, which would be leveraging, that's an 80-20 grant. So that's part of that. We also have developed some prototypical signs for bike and ped. We're working with our vendors on securing some low costs to make sure that we can build templates so that it's a universal sign across the country.
Yep, and I actually have the sample, one of the samples of in my office, if anyone would like to see this prototype sign. And so we worked on that quite a bit. The grant application, I just proofed it actually Monday from one of my staff. We'll be sending a whole, I think he sent yesterday, link to Rob. Rob had his staff doing some extensive work coming up with cost estimates, and they'll be needing to plug some of that information into the grant application. We'll be coming actually back to this county board with asking for a resolution of support in the next, we'll start with community development later this month, and then we'll be coming here the following month. So that's all been worked on. Nothing's been left sit. It's just, it takes time, and there's needed to be some greater direction. As to the park projects, it's the exact same thing. Believe two of the things you're mentioning was a very small pot of money, $5,000 each, and I considered that seed money. And in fact, one of them, for instance, the Bass Lake one, is for the new property, the Orff property on Bass Lake. And again, it's seed money. We've been working with other groups, and we have commitment from U.S. Fish and Wildlife to assist us. We have a planned burn on there. It will have a little bit of cost. Had to kind of wait for timing, working with the Somerset Fire Department. We also have worked with the Sportsman's Alliance and have it in the queue for them to use their grant funds to match that money. So basically what I've been doing is taking that $5,000 as seed money, trying to grow it with grants and use it as the match so that we can accomplish more before we're done. And that's kind of how I saw, when you have $5,000, you're not going to get a big capital improvement project done unless you use that as a seed to move things more along. And that's the same with the other piece of funding. So is that all of them?
Yes, yeah. And then lastly, the Highway Facility Fund, that what you're seeing there is the purchase of the property in Baldwin showing up, and once the bonds are sold next month, the bond proceeds will replenish the cost for the sale or the purchase of property. And then you had one other question. I think Bob will address that.
Yes, so on the, in terms of the total CIP budget, on the expenses sheet, we show the three lines in there for capital improvement projects. Right below there are the 2014 bonded projects, and then finally the health center construction. And so those are totaling up to 17 million or something. Compare that to the 2017 budget number of 5,787,000 on the CIP. That is new money in 17. What you see in here includes all of the amounts that have been carried forward from prior years. Any other questions on the financials? Seeing nothing? Thank you. Also just point out too that in terms of when we look at revenues, some of those numbers do look out of line, but consider that we keep our books open for a minimum of 2 months while we wait for state payments and grants and those kinds of things to come in. And especially like with HHS, they have a lot of money that comes in very late. They're filing claims for it. So we're actually still booking, we will be booking 2017 revenue probably in June of 18. So the numbers might look out of line, but they'll be there at the end of the year. Okay. Anything else? Seeing no other questions, we'll move forward on our agenda to the business items. Health and Human Service, Children's Services Division report on foster care and the child welfare system. Supervisor Babbitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a presentation that was given to the Health and Human Services Board last month that we felt was significant enough to bring to the full board at this time. We are facing nationally and certainly at the state and county level a crisis right now relating to the opioid situation that we've been dealing with for quite a long time, that's relating to how and where we place children who are in the homes of individuals who have overdosed or been arrested or in some other way have been interacted with, if you will, by the county. And St. Croix County, of course, is not immune from increasing pressures on foster care and other placement facilities. So we thought that it was important for the board to have this information in anticipation, I believe, of coming back to the board at some point in the relatively near future to discuss what staffing levels look like within HHS to cope with this issue. We are not, at least I am not quite yet ready to pull the alarm bell here, but we're close. So I think the board needs to have the background that this PowerPoint will provide, and Fred Johnson is obviously here to open up the further discussion on the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Dr. Babbitt. 3 things that I would like to review today. First is some data that's in the PowerPoint presentation, more regional data, but this is, from what I've seen, typical of statewide data. Cindy, can you pull that up on the screen?
The PowerPoint.
Where's it at? What'd she say?
It's a shortcut on the there's a shortcut on the
Cindy, am I going to? Okay. You didn't bargain for that.
I don't even have to talk.
So just real briefly, this was a presentation that was provided, one of 6 presentations to the Speakers Task Force on foster care. So I don't intend to go through every slide, but just hit a couple of highlights. The second point, as we would like to provide a little bit more detail on current St. Croix data. And then the third talking point would be some of the things that we're currently doing. And to the latter 2 points, Julie Krings, who is our Children's Services Administrator, will come up and provide some of that detail. As Dr. Babbitt had mentioned, this has been reviewed with the Health and Human Services Board last month. Plan to discuss this issue with the Health and Human Services Board at their next meeting on January 9th. And also anticipate a review of this at our next CJCC meeting, which is scheduled for November 11th. So a couple of slides that I thought would be important to at least highlight. Is this slide, which really talks about the situation is a crisis. It's unprecedented. Child welfare agencies are struggling. We're seeing the highest level of utilization in our foster care system in a decade and a shortage of foster care resources. And we're seeing a surge in casework. And in the last state biennial budget, there was an increase of $5 million in the state allocation to serve children and families, and specifically in St. Croix County, I believe it was in September of 2017, this board supported a budget amendment to add a social work staff, which we did and have hired that person, and they started, I believe, in November, a little bit before the budgeting process, which we appreciated immensely. Some of the driving issues. La Crosse County provided some data with regard to what they're seeing in terms of child protection referrals, a 35% increase. And remember, this is what was presented to the Speakers Task Force. Other counties have seen increases that are significant in terms of their children in need of protection and service cases. So those would be open cases, whether they're an informal disposition or a formal adjudication process through our juvenile court. We're seeing increase in complexity of cases, mental health, substance exposed, and substance abuse and addiction. And we're seeing increases in out-of-home care. La Crosse has seen a 59% increase between the 2009 to 2016. Other counties you can see have highlighted significant changes. I'll include Chippewa County on there. Quite a substantial increase in the utilization of out-of-home care. We did, Jason Witt is the director in La Crosse County, and he reached out to St. Croix, and some of the data that we provided is included, and here happens to be a slide. I want to highlight that in September our number of children in alternate care was 45. Today it's roughly 70. So in a short period of time we've seen an increase in utilization based on needs in our community. I'm going to slide through a few of these. I would encourage you when you have time to take a look at them. They're not unimportant because I'm moving through them quickly, but I want to make sure that we have ample opportunity to talk about some St. Croix County data. So La Crosse County, these are some out-of-home care costs. St. Croix County, you can see that we had projected in September that we would be in purchase services for children, that we would be about $70,000 over budget. After meeting with our financial manager in Health and Human Services, Dr. Beata Haug, that number has increased now to about $180,000 in those particular line items. But you can see counties are experiencing overages. The percent variance and the dollar variance is pretty significant. And as you might speculate, human services departments are exhausting fund balances, fund reserves, and apparently at least one county has identified serious financial troubles due to this issue. So with that, I didn't expect to go through any more detail on this PowerPoint, but the task force has come up with a list of legislative recommendations, and they're in process now. One that I am particularly interested in is a caseload study to look at what type of a caseload statewide should be implemented in terms of a standard, as I understand it. So with that, to lay a little bit of the backdrop of what I think is a statewide issue, I had to ask Julie to come on up and talk a little bit about some more specific St. Croix County data and some of the things that we're currently working on within our Health and Human Services Department. I don't know, can somebody, Julie can handle getting to the next one. Perfect. All right.
I think I can handle it. Well, I want to thank you for your time and want to thank Mr. Thompson for getting us on the agenda, because as Fred had said, this is definitely a crisis and we want to bring you up to speed right away. And I know Health and Human Services board members, you've seen some of this data already, but here's a little bit of new data for you, and this is just specific to St. Croix County. So if we take a look at this first slide here, this is children that are taken into custody, and this is throughout the entire year. Of course, 2017, it's just through December 27th of when I pulled that data. And of course, we did take additional kids into custody towards the end of the year. But if you take a look at 2017, 92 kids we took into custody compared to the previous year of 33. That's a very significant piece of information right there. And the majority has been due to methamphetamine use of the parents. We're also seeing a little bit of heroin, but primarily it's due to methamphetamine. You know, we hear the stories in the newspaper about an adult overdosing, but the untold stories are that adult has 2 children or, you know, is caring for X, Y, and Z. And so that's what we're coming across. And the majority of these children are under the age of 11. 30-some kids were under the age of 4. So we're talking very young children. The next slide I wanted to highlight is these are point-in-time out-of-home placement numbers. Our out-of-home placement changes daily. It changed today because of what happened last night. So this is a point in time on December 27th of each year. And so if you take a look at in 2013, we had only 23 kids in out-of-home placement compared to where we were at in 2017, we had 68. The big thing that I wanted to point out is I want you to take a look at the relative care. That has been outstanding, and that's something that while unfortunate that kids need to be removed from the home, this is something that we need to be proud of as a community, is that our families are stepping up to the plate and taking care of family members. We are very lucky to have this happen, not only because kids do better with their own family members, but also because of the fiscal impact. We're not having to place kids in other facilities. And so we are very lucky that we have this. Not other counties have this like what we do. So that's something that we should take note upon. And then we've also had a spike in residential care here with having 5 children in at this point in time. This is often due to complex mental health issues, often related to some of the trauma that they've experienced as children. And that's where, if we're taking a look at from the financial perspective, these are the placements that cost a lot of money. But obviously these children need that level of care. The other thing too that the board should be knowing about is that placements are supply and demand. Years ago, placement facilities would really want and market to try to get placements so they could financially stay alive. Now counties are competing with placements because all the counties are in about the same boat that we are in. So when we're having to look outside of our own system, we're competing against 71 other counties for placements, and a lot of placements have wait lists. There's a facility in Eau Claire that's got a six-month wait list. So it's been difficult to try to find placements. One of the things that I surely hope to avoid, and Mr. Johnson agrees with me, is that avoiding having to have children placed in our Health and Human Services building or hotel rooms. Unfortunately, other counties have been in that boat. Douglas County currently is doing that right now, the Superior area, where they have been purchasing air mattresses and pack and plays, play pens for little babies. And they are actually having to have kids stay at their facility because they're not able to find homes for them. So can you imagine that that's that child's home? And then also just the logistics. Where does the kid take the shower? Actually, the jail is doing the food for the kids and having the food brought in. So not only, we just don't want that to happen. And so again, we're trying to be as proactive as possible, but just wanted to point out about our placements here. The other slide that I wanted to highlight is this is cases that go to courts. So it's called a CHIPS action, Child in Need of Protection and Services. And so towards the end of 2017, we were at 84 CHIPS cases. So even if you take a look at where we were at in 2013, we're at 33. So again, a significant increase. And again, taxing our courts' resources as well. And then this slide is about the volume of reports. So you guys had heard about their dispatch numbers increasing and sheriff calls. Well, our calls have been increasing as well. So far in 2017, we had 119 more child protection reports than we did the previous year. And those reports need to a lot of detail that goes into making a child protection report. If anybody's a mandated reporter or has done a report before, you know that there's a significant amount of information that needs to be gathered. We need to screen that report and make a decision on what should happen. As of December 27th, we had screened in 444 child protection reports. So again, much higher numbers than last year. So about a 10% increase, if you will, in data. So as you can see, we have definitely increased our work here in St. Croix County. And like I had said, it's primarily due to methamphetamine and then heroin coming in second. We've got great staff in Children's Services. Everybody has been working very hard. We've been trying to be as proactive as possible of what we can do. One of the things that we have done is we've redesigned our access unit. We now have 3 people taking child protection referrals in addition to all the other children's services referrals sources. We did some restructuring. There wasn't any additional staff. We just restructured how that looked so we can make sure that we are available because on some of these calls we have to go out immediately. So we want to make sure that we have full coverage for that and also to meet the demand because an average access call takes about 2 hours for somebody to complete. By the time they talk to the person, they do background checks and all the other information that they have to do, enter it into our system, and then make a screening decision. The other thing that we have did is this past summer, we had a vacancy in our juvenile justice position. Our juvenile justice worker joined the Peace Corps. Great for her. But one of the things that we did with that is at that time our juvenile justice numbers were down. So we transferred that position into ongoing child protection to try to continue to meet that need. As Mr. Johnson had said that you all supported a budget amendment to have another child protection social worker, and we are extremely grateful for that. Aubrey started in November, and she came with a great deal of experience, especially in the area of working with families with drug abuse, and that has helped out considerably, so we are very appreciative of that. The other piece that we've been doing is we're trying to amp up our foster care recruitment. We have joined the statewide effort on trying to figure out how to find foster homes. We currently have 20 licensed foster homes in St. Croix County. All are being used. We also have shelter homes within that home. So they're on call if we need to place a child. And again, that has kind of helped save us in having to do the air mattresses in our building. The other piece with our foster care, though, is that sometimes a child will end up being adopted by the foster parents, which is great. We want that to happen. But then we lose that foster home. And, they just want to focus on the child that they have, and we're grateful for that. So we are losing one of our foster homes this month because they've decided just to focus on the child that they have. Super happy, but again, this is part of that system that goes into place. And then also we are working on permanency planning. So that's taking a look at children placed outside the home and trying to figure out the best way to find that child a permanent residence, whether that's reunify within their family or look at relatives or termination of parental rights. One thing that I'm really proud of our staff is we have about 90% of our children return to their parents. That is an outstanding statistic, and that really demonstrates the hard work that families and our staff have been doing. The other thing that I know our Health and Human Services Board has heard about, but we've started family-centered treatment. That's an intensive in-home therapy program. We transitioned from MST, which served more of our juvenile justice population, and that now that our new program serves both juvenile justice and child protection families. We just started in November. We are currently serving 6 families in that program, and we have 2 on the wait list. But again, that's trying to be proactive and tackling some of these issues. As part of our FCT process, we are also partnering with our alcohol and drug team in behavioral health. Kristen Depre is part of our FCT team, and we're hoping to have a substance abuse counselor join that team and do counseling a little bit outside the box, going to the home and providing that in the home. So again, looking at being creative and staying relevant to our treatment needs. So we really truly appreciate the partnership with our AODA folks. The other thing is we're focusing on motivational interviewing. Those are techniques that we use to try to get people to move towards change. It might seem pretty simple, but for people that have been part of drug court, you'll often hear Judge Waterman do some motivational interviewing from the bench, and that really gets towards that change. Another big piece is we're supporting our current foster parents. They are taking difficult children. Our foster care coordinator, John Brettel, has been doing an exceptional job providing them with the support that they need so they don't burn out. But again, continuing to work on those efforts. And then also we've partnered with our corporation council for those instances where reunification is not possible, where we need to proceed to termination of parental rights. Our corporation council is handling that for us, and Liz Roll has been doing an excellent job. We had told her when she first signed up for this it'd be about 1 year. Now she's 5 deep, and so waiting to process that through our court system. And then also child protection is a field where there's extremely high burnout. Luckily, wherever there's wood, let's knock on it. We don't have much turnover at all in child protection. We have extremely veteran staff, and knock on wood where there is some, but we try really hard to support our staff so we can keep them here, because other counties experience significant vacancies, and then that's more work, and then families don't get the attention that they need. So we're being very mindful of supporting our staff. So I've talked really fast and went through a lot of data quickly because I know that we're crunched for time. But do people have any questions for myself or Fred?
Supervisor Long.
Thank you, Julie. I don't really have a question. I just have another example for everyone. My wife works at as administrative assistant to a principal at a local elementary school. And of course, she's not able to share a lot of information from a confidentiality standpoint. So I don't never get a lot of information or a lot of details, but I know that these incidents, the frequency of these incidents that are occurring even at the elementary level is really alarming. So my point is this is a real problem, and we're going to need to be really concerned about this because I don't think it's going to go away.
Supervisor Doctorow?
Yeah, I may have misunderstood the data, but is there a different level of, I don't know if the word care is correct, for Milwaukee compared to the rest of the state of Wisconsin? I mean, because on page 81, it says there was a 2002 settlement that said that ongoing caseworkers will not exceed 11 in Milwaukee. But is Milwaukee exceeding it also? Or is there something different that's for Milwaukee compared to the rest of Wisconsin?
So Milwaukee is one of those instances where it is state supervised, it's not county supervised. The state took that over after a lawsuit due to significant concerns in how the system was operating. I'm trying to figure out what slide you're talking about so we can.
It's on the 11.1A is on the top and it's PG.
We don't have the numbers on this, but I think it is the slide that.
There it is. Yep.
I don't know specifically if Milwaukee is now exceeding those limits, but it has to do exactly with what Julie had highlighted. And there's one slide in here that talks about the difference in funding between Milwaukee County and the balance of the state, which is an issue.
How are we letting this happen? Or what can we do about it? I mean, should we have someone sue St. Croix County so then the state will take over and then we'll be in a better financial position? Or what?
Well, I think we have to take a look at one of the core reasons why we're having this increase, and that's due to the substance abuse increase, especially with methamphetamines and heroin. And there's a lot of strategies going on now and discussions about how to tackle those topics, because that's the root cause of that, because we are responding to what's happening in our community. And I know there's the CJCC has been working on a few of these issues as well.
Yeah, the other thing that I highlighted from the Speaker's Task Force is there was a work group looking at caseload standards. So I think following that legislation and in particular doing that for the balance of the state, including Milwaukee County. I don't, again, want to disparage Milwaukee County. They have a caseload standard that maybe that could be applicable to the rest of the state. And that's where I think the Speaker's Task Force may provide some opportunity to look at how can we address the needs statewide and then come up with funding.
And Fred was able to get me on that committee for the caseworker study, and our first meeting is next Thursday. Just to give you a rough number, part of it is like, how do you define a caseload? Do you talk about number of kids or families? You know, oftentimes if you have 3 kids in out-of-home care, they have significant needs, and that's a lot. Even with our additional CPS workers, our ongoing workers are averaging about 19.6 kids on their caseload, 10.6 families. But we're seeing a lot of multiple sibling groups in out-of-home placement, and each kid has their own needs that they need to be attended to.
Any other questions? Supervisor Babbitt?
Just more a comment, I guess, Mr. Chairman. I would just, again, really encourage each member of the board to look through this PowerPoint in detail. There's a couple of things I would highlight. One has to do with unfunded mandates. There are 3 or 4 slides here which are alarming when we look at what is required of HHS and Children's Services on each one of these cases, and the fact that there is no funding whatever to support all of those things that HHS and Children's Services are being asked to do. And secondly, looking at some of the stuff that we've just heard about now, caseworker numbers and burnout rates and those kinds of things, because we do have to stay on top of that as well. I think our numbers are getting to a point where I'm a little bit concerned about a 19.6 per caseworker caseload, but those are some of the highlights I would really encourage everybody to take a close look at.
Supervisor Schoberg.
I just want to give credit where credit is due. This problem's not just in 2018, it's 2007. It's been building up, hasn't it? Which of our local legislators, again, have been working with you to maybe authoring legislation to perhaps come up with this $25 million shortage? Have we been hearing from our local legislators on this?
This was a topic of conversation with our legislators at the Wisconsin Counties Association and Wisconsin County Human Services Association Day at the Capitol. And I think that was in April or May of 2017. So these conversations have started. There was $5 million extra dollars in the biennial budget. And to be honest, I see that as a good start. And one of these slides talks about flat funding levels in our child welfare system. And so hopefully those conversations can continue, but they haven't been recent at this point, at least from myself.
Any other questions? Supervisor Ard.
For persons and families interested in becoming foster home parents, who do they contact?
John Brettel is our foster care coordinator. If you just call the main number of our Health and Human Services, I can get it to you afterwards. We'd be glad to meet with them.
And because this is taped and somebody may watch that number is?
Oh my goodness.
715-246-6991, I believe, is our main number.
8230 is our access number.
Any other questions? Not seeing none. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
We'll move on with, we have a resolution here in opposition to SV 506 and AB 599. Do I have a motion? Supervisor Hanson. Second, Supervisor Berkey. Discussion, Supervisor Hanson.
This is a motion in opposition to legislation that would strip the DNR's authority to change the determination of navigability of waterways. And this is significant because when human alterations alter the amount of water that's flowing through a stream, suppose you have a little creek and suddenly somebody builds a dam. Now there's a lot of water there. And it's a lot of water for a long ways. The DNR will no longer have the ability to say, well, that's a navigable stream. It's going to have potential to do a lot of damage to the environment if they can't impose the rules that go along with that. And to permanently take away the ability to change the determination could be detrimental to the Lake St. Croix. It could be detrimental to the Red Cedar watershed, the St. Croix watershed, and watersheds similar to that throughout the state. For those reasons, myself and presumably members of my committee brought this forward for your consideration.
Supervisor Calder?
Yeah, I'm listed as an aye on this, and I didn't vote either way, and I didn't indicate to the recorder that I abstain on this, but I don't know enough about this issue to, this looks like a jurisdictional problem between Fish and Wildlife and the DNR. And I've run into these where the county's involved, and this accountability confusion puts landowners at a disadvantage incredibly because they get played for pickle in the middle by one federal agency or one state agency against the other. And I just assume that, and I don't, like I said, I don't know enough about this issue to vote on it responsibly, and so I'm going to abstain this time too. But I'd just say that I'd like clearer accountability, and so that people can go to one door, one window, and get their compliance all taken care of for property owners. I don't like the confusion in all this, and this just looks like a bill that is designed to clarify some of that. May not, may not, and I might be favorably disposed towards opposing it. I just don't know enough to say at this point, so I'm going to abstain. And I just soon we would deal with the need for foster homes and not wade into the issues that we have two other levels of government already dealing with.
Okay. Supervisor Ard.
SB 506 and AB 599 is a bill which should never have been on the floor. It is dealing with an individual issue, an individual landowner. It should have been settled within the DNR and that particular landowner. However, it has been brought to the legislature, and this language has been written. It has been through committee. The problem when something like this happens is that it's not just affecting one landowner. Once the legislation is passed, it becomes statutory. It affects everything and everyone in the state. Therefore, I would urge you to support the resolution against these legislative proposals.
Supervisor Long.
Is there any particular reason that these bills were not included in our packet? Because I'm kind of agree with Supervisor Coulter. I mean, I can't really make a determination on whether I would support them or not without having had the opportunity to review the bills themselves. So I don't feel like I have enough information. So I can't. I really would like to review the bills themselves before I could choose whether or not to support the resolution.
Supervisor Ard.
I would agree with you that the bill text, and I believe that any time a resolution is brought forth for or against legislative materials, that the bill language, the most current, should be included. I went to Legislative Reference Bureau to find the history and language of the bill so that I would be informed. I can only suggest in the future that hopefully we will have the text. The bill text would be included within anyone's proposal within the packet.
Here, Supervisor Schoberg.
I was able to find the same bill. It was on the internet. I've been serving on the county board now for 4 years, and I know how to use the internet. I know how to find legislative bills. It's pretty simple. And co-sponsored, this bill is co-sponsored by Senator Harsdorf. So, you know, what's behind another property owner getting their way through the legislator when there's all sorts of potential unintended consequences? This bill is pretty easy to understand. And then also there's advocacy by St. Croix River Association against it. I mean, that's good enough for me. So I've read it. I understand what this is about. And I appreciate that the community development already looked at this and analyzed it, and they came to a resolution themselves. So I'm prepared to vote in favor of this resolution.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Babbitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think obviously the specific language of the bill is important, and I would support what's previously been talked about in terms of having the text available, although it's true the text is not difficult to find necessarily if you're interested in doing that. The issue which really bothers me is that once again we have a piece of legislation coming forward through the state process which focuses on a single landowner. This is easily the third time I know of in the last few months at least, and there may be more, where a bill has come forward focused on one individual, and to me that just does not make sense. So on that basis alone, I will vote to support the resolution.
Any other discussion? Not seeing any other discussion, we'll vote on this. Two abstain, 1 no, and it passes. So thank you. Our next resolution on the agenda is the resolution updating personnel policy manual, creating an update section to travel time, expense reimbursement, training, conferences, and conventions, and mileage reimbursement. I have a motion. Supervisor Schoberg, a motion. Second, Supervisor Hanson. Discussion.
Yes, just a couple comments on this. The HR department is in the process of reviewing and updating the entire personnel policy manual. There are 4 policies. As I mentioned earlier, the ERP system went into effect January 2nd for the county. There are 4 specific policies that need revision immediately so that they can be administered according to the new ERP system. And those are in your packet. They're in reference to travel time, expense reimbursement, training and conferences, and mileage reimbursement. Normally, we don't take these out of sequence, but these have been taken out of sequence. They've been brought in front of staff advisory. They've been brought in front of the department head group for input, which we have incorporated into the language of these policies. And then finally, we brought them in front of the administration committee at their last meeting and garnered the input from the administration committee, which the HR director has incorporated into these 4 revised policies. I don't know if you have individual specific questions. They've been thoroughly vetted by the stakeholder groups and are in front of you this morning for consideration. But we can certainly take questions if you have them.
Question, Supervisor Berkey.
I guess mine isn't a question. You'll notice in committee that I actually didn't support this. And the reason that I didn't, there's just one piece of it that concerns me, and that is that meals would not be reimbursed as receipts submitted by employees, but there would be a flat fee that would be reimbursed to employees. So I would offer an amendment to keep the rates the same, the 8 for morning meal, noon meal 12, evening meal 20, but to take out the flat rate, per diem rate for individuals' meals, and use the system that we currently have, which is to provide receipts for meals. I think that, if I might offer, it seems that it ultimately could become more expensive for costs for meals. That's one issue. And the other is I don't think it's asking too much in terms of accountability from employees to have those receipts available. So I would move to amend.
Do I have a second? Supervisor Hanson. Nelson. Nelson. Second, right? So we have a motion to amend. Discussion on that motion.
Maybe a little bit of background on why the revision to this policy. Currently, there's a $40 limit for meal reimbursement. The revised policy maintains that threshold of a $40 limit. But to streamline and to simplify the administration of meal reimbursement, the finance department and administration are supporting this revised policy to cut down on the amount of staff time that is being spent dealing with individual receipts, the finance department dealing with individual receipts, following up with employees regarding individual receipts. We don't believe it will drive up the costs for meal reimbursement. In fact, we feel, the finance department feels that with the simplification and the streamlining of the administration of meal reimbursement, we actually probably will save time. And if there is any increased cost for per diem, it will easily be made up with the saved staff time and efficiency in the finance department of the staff that are dealing with how to reconcile the hundreds of receipts that they receive probably on a bi-monthly or monthly basis. So that's a little bit of the background regarding this. If there are more detailed questions, I would ask either Bob or Ken, maybe Tara, to answer them specifically, but that's a little bit of background on why we're doing this.
Supervisor R., did you still have that question?
It's more of a comment, and that is that Administrator Thompson has put this very clearly. When you are retaining receipts from the number of staff that we have traveling at any given time on any given day, and you are tracking those receipts, you are using a considerable amount of staff time and resources. This proposal streamlines that considerably. If you look at it and do just a simple analysis, if one department is at a conference and you're getting 3 receipts a day back from each of those department members, and your department is 10 people, you have more than a considerable amount of time in tracking those receipts and verifying them. This simplifies the procedure. It also states that we have great belief in the character of our staff members. This proposal as it stands is what we should be supporting.
Supervisor Axelrod.
Same thing. I believe by doing it this way, we're actually going to save money. Because if we may overpay a few employees, we're certainly going to save a far more in the employee work time that could be spent to much better usage than following our employees because we don't trust them.
Any other discussions? Supervisor Nelson.
It's not a matter of distrust. I worked in the public sector 26 years. I used that process. And a lot of times, I wouldn't go up to the threshold or even near the threshold of what I was allotted for that day. A lot of times in breakfast, like if I had to go to a class, I work out in the morning and I don't usually eat something. So I'm saving money towards the county. It's not that I distrust the process when I worked fine. Plus we got the $1 million ERP system that should be able to track it all. So I'm okay with it either way, but I also agree with Supervisor Berkey, that the possibility a lot of people don't do breakfast, but now all of a sudden we're adding that cost right off the bat. So it's not a distrust thing. It's also a thing of me personally. I was frugal a lot of times when I went, because I knew when I was on the company dime that I didn't want to expend more money that I thought was possible or was necessary. So now I'm fine either way, but the other process is fine too.
Supervisor Peterson.
I have enough confidence in our administration that if they should spot that this is an increased cost, they would certainly bring it back to our attention and we could rescind it. I'll support it and vote against the amendment.
Supervisor.
A question for Patrick. Are you kind of expecting people just to do a automatic per diem of $40 and not break it out? Just write down in the expense report $40 for meals, and that'll just be a line item for most everybody?
I would, Bob or Ken, do you want to speak to that? What you envision the impact on this?
So in the ERP system, you put in the per diem, which is signifying on the per diem which meals were uncovered. So if you go to a conference and lunch was covered, you subtract $12 off that. That's still the $8, $12, $20, but any meals that are already covered, or if your hotel has a continental breakfast, you deduct that off of there.
So if an employee chooses not to have breakfast, they would deduct that from the per diem?
It's not if they don't choose to have breakfast, it's if they have a breakfast or a lunch provided by the conference. Any of the meals provided by a conference or some mechanism through where they're staying would be deducted from their per diem.
Yeah.
But if they just didn't eat breakfast, like Scott, because he goes out for a jog in the morning instead, and it's not covered, he is still entitled to that per diem, he'd be paid for that.
Is the hotel breakfast policy written down someplace so people understand that?
You know, I think that's an interpretation point. I think what the policy says is that any meal that's provided on the trip is not reimbursable.
Also, I think in the past we've asked people to submit copies of agendas and so on, just to help us ascertain that in fact they were eligible for a meal and that it wasn't part of the conference fee. We will continue to do that, and we're actually putting a lot more of the approval up upon the department heads to assure us that certain meals are not going to be eligible for the per diem, and we'll continue as a department to audit expense reports in that regard. What we won't have to do is be spending time going after people because they didn't turn in a receipt. And what ends up happening is then, we'll be instructing them that to call the restaurant. You can get a copy of your receipt with your charge card. And how much time do they spend doing that? It's not just finance department time. It's the people submitting expense reports are also spending time. And I'm not saying I'm defending them not being able to hold on to a receipt, but it is the fact of life.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Did everybody understand what the amendment was? You want it repeated? You understand?
Yeah, repeat what we're voting on right now, please.
Basically, it was to change the first, let's see, meal expenses are paid, strike on a flat per diem rate, that would be struck, and it would be the language that is currently there, which I don't have in front of me. But people would submit their receipts for meals, and those levels would actually be the same. Mm-hmm.
Does everybody understand? So we don't have to go through that again. Time to vote. Three yeses, the rest are noes. So it failed. So we go back to the original.
Not that it matters, but I actually hit the wrong button. I did legitimately hit the wrong button. Not that it matters, but I would just like it entered in that I did intend to vote no. And just so you know, if you hit yes and confirm, you can't hit no 17 more times. It won't change it. But can we just make mention of it in the minutes, please?
Can you change it?
I'm embarrassed now. Two mistakes a year, and I've already used up one.
So we're back to the original motion on the floor. Do we need any more discussion on that? We don't need any more discussion. It's time to vote on the original resolution.
Supervisor Hanson, second. Yep. Ready to vote? Are you ready?
Ready? Yep. That's all yeses. Thank you. Request for future agenda items. If anybody has one, or if not, you can get them to myself or Pat or Cindy, and we'll put them on the agenda. So, not seeing anybody jumping right up. We'll go with the county clerk's report and correspondence.
I have no correspondence, but just wanted to mention a few things with respect to the upcoming elections. Election scheduled for January 16th for the state senate position. The candidacy papers for county board supervisor were due January 2nd at 5 p.m. I have posted a list of the candidates on the website under election information, so you'll find it out there. I wanted to mention just that there are 4 seats that are have no opposition. With respect to for District 1, Supervisor Seacard did not file did not complete his filing and did not file a notification of non-candidacy. In that case, that allows a 72-hour extension for someone to file in that for that seat. Not the incumbent, but a candidate may file. The deadline is 5 p.m. on Friday. There is a candidate now, but I just wanted you to be aware of that extension on that. So, and that doesn't, there's no primary for any county supervisor district. However, there will be a statewide primary February 20th. So that's it.
Thank you, Cindy. Are there any announcements anybody has? Not seeing anybody jumping out, I guess we'll thank you everyone for a good meeting, and we're adjourned.